Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Chaz. And today my guest is Matthew Gay, or as you may know him from Instagram as Matt G Fit. Matt, how you doing, brother?
Man, I'm doing really good. I'm doing good.
That's awesome. I'm super excited for this podcast, man. It's gonna be great. A lot of good information.
Yeah.
So, you are a fitness trainer, fitness coach who combines both your faith as a Christian and physical health, nutrition, and everything that encompasses fitness. So, in your words, how would you describe what you do? Better than I can. How would you describe it to the audience?
Yeah, we want to help people experience the goodness and the fullness of God on their health journey. And a lot of that has to do with um, their approach to fitness, their approach to relationship with themselves. Um, when we're working with somebody, what we're trying to do is simplify health and fitness. We're trying to point them towards approaching nutrition, emotions, stress management, their lifestyle structure in a biblical manner, because all those things obviously they affect our future. They affect everything else going around on around us. They affect our witness, right? And that is the ultimate focus here, right? So in helping our people, we are doing a lot of damage control, right? Changing the way that they're thinking about food and the way that they're treating exercise, treating their bodies and whatnot. But we don't just want to give surface level instruction where it's, oh, just do this diet, just do these workouts, and it'll solve all your problems. We want to get to a deeper level with all of our people so that we can actually set them up for long term success. And that's where Christ does his best work, right? At a deeper level where we're dealing with matters of the heart and the soul and the mind. They don't need to hear my philosophies and what I think and my opinions. They need to hear the word of God if they're really going to transform. And so, in our coaching, while we are applying proven strategies, evidence based strategies, and science, we're also applying biblical principle to the way that we're guiding our folks.
I think that's amazing. And like I told you before we started recording, I think that it's something that is oftentimes neglected, and I think it's really sad that a lot of Christians really neglect their physical fitness because I know for me personally, once I started praying before my workouts and really using that as something to glorify God, it put a whole new perspective on it for me. It wasn't separated, you know?
Right.
And everything we can do is for the glory of God. So I think that it's so important that you do what you do, and I think a lot more people need to hear the message.
Yep.
But for you personally, how did this come to combine the two, both faith and health? What kinda led you to do the work that you do? Were you always were you a Christian and then you got into fitness? Were you into fitness and then found Christ? How did this all come together to really be what it is today for you?
Yeah, for me, I was growing in my faith. I was newer to the faith as a fitness coach. I had gone through some really big life events. One of them, I almost lost my life, and so I was really wrestling with the idea of having to leave ministry, which I was really growing more zealous in evangelism and wanting to tell people about the gospel and whatnot. And street ministry, I was in a young adult group called Street Light Christian Project that I actually started. But then I was leaving, things that I was doing on YouTube and in the streets and stuff like that to go train people in the gym. And I struggled for about 2 years, and I was praying to the Lord, like, I had a family. I got bills to pay and things. Help me to serve you and make a living doing it. Like, give me an opportunity to just like go full time ministry, right? And I dabbled and just prayed and wrestled with it. Um, and I would say before this period where I was becoming more zealous in the Lord as I was training, I was really idolizing fitness, right? So it was fitness is an idol for me. I'm learning to feel more confident in the gym and in my own body, and now that's become a thing for me now. And I'm doing whatever it takes to build muscle, even if it's not ethical. And then now I am really starting to take my faith more seriously. Now I'm actually just walking in this thing. Christ has captivated my heart. I'm zealous for the Lord. And so now there's a switch to where now it's not about fitness at all. I'm like irritated with fitness. It's all about Jesus, and fitness is stupid because it's taking me away from ministry. And then after a couple of years, I remember talking to a buddy of mine named Duke. He was like a mentor to me at the time,
Mhm.
and um, I was wrestling because I felt like there was more to the fitness side of things than I was able to apply. And so I wanted to use what I had, what I was doing in health and fitness for the church. I was like, it's like one of those, like I remember actually this reading in Moses or about Moses and their staves, the shepherds would have markings on their staffs, almost like a journal, almost like milestone things that happened in their lives. Some shepherds would do that; they would mark them up, and so it made me think like when Moses threw down his staff, he wasn't just throwing down his occupation; it was also his vocation. He was throwing down his life, and the Lord made it in that situation the snake that consumed the other two snakes, right? So for me, it just spoke so much, and to me, it said, Matt, you've got to take this occupation that you've got and you need to lay it down for the Lord, like offer that to him. And that started kind of the path of fitness becoming my ministry. And going back to that conversation with Duke, I had started doing fitness classes and stuff like that at my church and whatnot. And he was telling me, hey man, like I don't think the church is going to tell you that what you're doing is actually a ministry that it needs, because this isn't talked about in the church very often. Um, but they need to hear what message you've got. And that just gave me permission, man. I remember the Lord telling me after that conversation while I was standing in the kitchen, you need to stop asking me for an opportunity to serve me and make a living doing it, because I've already given you that opportunity. You're just not seeing it that way. And so that was really the origin of kind of where I'm at now. And it just developed over the years. And eventually in 2020, I branched off from the gym world and started Fit Coach USA. And I've been doing faith inspired training ever since then.
That's awesome. So why do you think then that the church tends to not gravitate towards health and fitness like you mentioned, where it might not be very common or well received? Why do you think that is? Because I tend to notice that it's just something that's not talked about enough. People really do separate the two, and I don't understand why. Because I've been an athlete my whole life. I played a little bit of college soccer. I went to small Christian school before I transferred. I just graduated from Clemson, but I've been an athlete my whole life, and I've just seen just how beneficial it is for a human being to be involved in
Mhm.
physical fitness, and then when your faith comes into it, it takes it up a whole nother level because the fitness almost takes a backseat, but
Yeah,
when your faith is leading the way, you can see even better results too. And then when you feel better physically, you can do more, you can be a light for more people to
yeah.
grow closer to Christ. And so why do you think that is? Why do you think so many people put it on the back burner for so long?
Yeah, there's a few reasons that I think churches don't speak about health and fitness more. One of them, sadly, is because a lot of pastors are out of shape, right? So when they're not living the lifestyle, it's hard to talk about it because
Mhm,
it can come off as very hypocritical, and that's a harsh truth. But that I think comes from a culture that doesn't really emphasize self-care that much. It's about working, it's about serving, it's about doing everything for everyone else. And if you do take too much time for yourself, it's like selfish or prideful or whatever it is. Not realizing that there's a bit of an ignorance there, because if we self-neglect, then we now have issues that we're forced to take care of, which by nature pulls us away from ministering to other people.
mhm,
So I think there's some stuff that's being overlooked there. That's one aspect. Two, I just think that I think it's been a slow process, because the church didn't need to go to the gym when it first started, right? Like their lifestyle was the gym. Like we're
mhm,
simulating their lifestyle now by exercising and doing certain things. Their everyday life required them to do manual labor and to work the field and use their muscles and endurance and strength. And so therefore they naturally took care of themselves in ways that we don't, because we're naturally sedentary and have cars and can use Amazon Prime, right? And
Mhm.
people were hunting and whatnot. And so the nutrition was different too. There wasn't a bunch of chemicals and processed food. You made everything that you ate. We don't have that situation. There is an abundance, especially here in America. It's everywhere. So the church, I think, just gradually over the years has just kind of fallen into conforming to the patterns of this world in that sense, to
Mhm.
where we are eating just the same as everyone else. Therefore, we're just as sick as everyone else. The only problem is it is one of those things that I think onlookers who are not believers kind of judge us for, because we are saying that our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit and we honor God with our bodies and da 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 da. We're representatives of the kingdom and the light of the world, and we are dying from the same diseases and just as sick and beat up and battered in some ways, especially when it comes to self-care, mindset, and stuff like that. Because health and fitness isn't the only thing we're not talking about. We don't talk about mental state and seeing a psychiatrist, a therapist, and stuff like that as much either. So there's ways that we're not doing too hot, and the world's looking at us saying, "Man, the way that I connect, the way that that's relevant to me, the way that I do understand, because I don't get all the spiritual stuff from that aspect, you're just as busted up as everybody else.
Yep.
I don't see anything different about you, right?" So I think, like I said, it goes back to us overlooking the significance of this, not realizing that the enemy is using the fork and people's plates to really hinder a lot of believers. So being naive in that sense, just slowly conforming to the patterns of the world and it's just like the culture, unintentionally, not talking about health and fitness, and then also I think just the leadership not, you know, leading the way and and
Mhm.
and being the example.
I agree. I do think that a better example needs to be set, and I think that a lot of things would follow if we did have, people at the head of the church, pastors, people who are on stage who everyone, sees every week, every Sunday, and sees them taking care of their body. I think that it would go a long way.
Absolutely.
But as far as nutrition goes, how do you approach nutrition? Do you eliminate almost completely anything processed, any junk food, so to speak? Have you removed that completely, or what type of diet approach do you take that combines your faith and your nutrition? Because I'm on vacation right now actually, and so I
Cool.
know I can say for myself I haven't been doing the best with my nutrition the past week, but we tend to, I don't know about you, but I can be like, "Oh, I'm on vacation," like
Yeah.
what's your stance? Has it been easy for you to like remove things completely, or is it really moderation is key? How do you look at that?
100% moderation. Yeah, 100% moderation. It's just the Bible tells us in many different ways that too much of something is not a good thing,
Mhm.
right? There's a proverb that talks about consuming too much honey is not good for the body. It's just like too much glory, and I think it's interesting. They're not stabbing at our sweet tooth, but essentially, I think it's just interesting that the author is like, hey, we understand that too much sugar is not good, right? And that applies in so many different ways. When we don't have balance, there's dysfunction, right? So I am a huge fan of moderation. I'm a huge fan of self-awareness, mindful eating, right? So eliminating a food group, like people will say don't eat carbs or whatever it is, especially
Mhm.
in the fat loss industry. And my take on that is, if God made it and he said it's good, then why are you saying it's bad?
Mhm.
Right? And I challenge a lot of people who are like, "Oh, well, this specialist says this, and this documentary says that," and I'm like, "Well, let's look at the Bible. Let's look at Genesis 1, 29. Where he tells them that he makes the vegetation and he gives them, all that for food. And then in Genesis 9:3, he tells Noah, hey, just like I gave you all the green vegetation and the plants and all that, so now I'm giving you every living thing, the moving things as well too for food, right? And so we see God's essential diet plan. It's like, eat what I made, right? And eat it in moderation, right? And so that's my take on it, man. In our program, we use like calorie and tracking on the front end to educate our folks and help them to understand portions and food quality. And then we transition them to the plate method where they're using more visuals and not tracking as much. And our emphasis in that is we want people to see food for food. We want them to see food the way God intended people to see food, and that's just the way I approach my life. I mean, I find healthy ways to eat treats. Like for example, I was snacking on this before we hopped on the call, but I made these little homemade protein bars that I
Mm,
have in the freezer, and they taste like little ice cream bars. But I find healthy ways to treat myself, and then I will also have like spicy chicken tenders, like I did last night when I got home from Mexican with my friends. Like, there are those days. But a lifestyle that is considerate of how God designed our bodies to eat and what He just wanted for us,
mhm.
primarily. That is what I believe, honestly, and we can see the evidence of this is going to yield the best results, lead to the longest life, less disease, better energy, mental clarity. So, let's just be mindful of what He wanted when He made the whole thing, because it is His creation,
Yep.
including our bodies.
Yeah, yeah, very true. And I'm glad you mentioned too tracking calories because that's another thing I was going to ask you because I've done that personally. I in college and a little bit out of college, I've lost probably 30, 20, 25, 30 pounds. And so I was big on tracking. I don't think I could have done it if I wouldn't have tracked because I love eating. I
Yeah.
always have. And so I think that's great that you start with that, and then once you are aware of every kind of how everything works, then like steering away from that. Because when I'm not dieting, I try not to because I don't want to
Yeah.
track all the time. I think it can get unhealthy, but I do think it's a good way to implement discipline, especially at first. But I've also noticed too that the more I think about it, because when I really try like there are no loopholes, there's no shortcuts, there's no way
Yeah.
around it. At the end of the day, it often just comes down to, like you said, eating what God intended us to eat,
Hmm.
eating the clean foods, the fruits, the vegetables, the protein, and
Yeah.
you can lose weight eating McDonald's every day. You technically can, but it's not
Yeah.
it's not a very good approach. And
Yeah.
I
You might
I
have other
keep
issues.
finding that. Yeah, I keep finding that the more I diet and the more I do it, it really does come down to, especially when I started looking at the content you've been putting out, it puts everything in perspective. It really is. Well, how does God want me to eat? We're not supposed to just go through the drive-thru every day or like
Right.
it even like I said, even if we're losing weight, it's not really the way it's supposed to work.
Hmm.
But I think it's great that you take the tracking and hold it like kind of in the front end and then get rid of it. But I have another question. I'm really curious
Sure.
to hear your point or hear your opinion on this. What do you think of the fitness industry as a whole, as far as fitness influencers and the real like it? Are you familiar with Alex Eubank? Do you know
No.
he's a fitness? I'll send you his page after this and just hear your thoughts on it. But do you have an opinion on bodybuilding and the fitness industry in that sense? Do you think that crosses a line of being prideful when your content is always and these are some of these people claim to be Christian and,
Hmm.
profess their faith. Do you think there's a line you cross when all of your content is you no shirt, basically really just half naked, you know what I mean? Like promoting
Yeah.
you're just shredded and then bodybuilding you get on stage and you do it. Do you have an opinion on that? Do you think that's too much, especially for people who say that they're Christians?
Yeah, I will say on the front end, just my immediate response to that is I think that the folks that are always showing off their bodies, they always have their shirts off and stuff like that. And we know why they're doing that, right? Like people want to see that. It's attractive just to the ladies. The guys are like, oh shoot, right? So they know that that's going to lead to follows and likes, and people are going to then listen to them because when you have rippling abs, obviously you know what you're doing, and so that's money in their pocket or more follows, whatever it is. The only problem is a Christian, you do want to be careful of causing people to stumble, right? Like
Mhm.
there's people out there really struggling on the internet with what they're looking at. They got people's husbands and wives that are out there looking at your body and lusting, because you're just always showing it off. There's nothing to
Mhm.
hide, right? So you got to be mindful of that. I do have, some posts that I've made that it's like, hey, like I did a show. I did a men's physique show in 2021, did really well. And I have pictures from that. And I was proud of what I accomplished, but it's not something that I'm gonna do all the time, right?
Mhm.
Like it's something that you got to just kind of be mindful of. I mean, um, that's my initial response to just that aspect of it.
Mhm.
Um, I think we just I can only speak to the believers because I can't expect folks that don't believe, that aren't following Jesus, to I can't hold them to a biblical standard. But I would speak to you if you are an influencer, a fitness coach, and you're a Christian, and you've got God first, right, on your profile. Then make sure that when people see you, they are seeing Christ.
Mhm.
They're not just gawking at what you got to offer physically. You know,
Yeah.
um,
I
so
think I think that's a great I think that's a great take because it's not one, it's not condemning, and it's not, "Oh, this is horrible," like, as
yeah,
I've been really trying to pick people's brains on it, especially my good friends and people that I have on here as well that are Christian, because I really it's something that was on my mind a lot when I started losing the weight, and I wanted to be a little bit more active on my social media, and I wanted to I wanted to inspire, and I wanted to bring a positive image. I wanted to uplift people when I was making fitness content,
yeah,
and I had the dilemma where I just didn't want it to go too far because I only have a couple of pictures like that on my Instagram too, and it was something where I wanted to stay humble, but I do see the point where because people who know me from school, my diet was trash.
yep,
I wasn't living out
same,
my faith. I wasn't a good example. I wasn't a good role model or light to anyone really.
hmm
I wasn't influencing people well, and so when I looked at it and I was like, wow, I've seen so much progress with my faith, my fitness, everything. It was like I did want to show people because I kind
yep,
of had almost a chip on my shoulder too, where I was like, people didn't think that I could turn it around, you know? And so it's something that I've dealt with a lot too, where I thought about it a lot and I keep hearing, especially among believers, like the commonality of it really does seem like moderation and intention, you know?
yep,
Where is your heart posture when it comes down to it, and whether or not all your pictures are like that or all your content is like that. And I think that when you find the balance and something is geared towards being informative or inspirational or uplifting, I really do think that there's a place for it, but there's a time and place for it to not be there as well.
yeah. And
And
it's important to consider, like, what does it look like for you as an individual to be
mhm,
faithful to God? Now, there's obviously, when we look at the Bible, there are certain things that just apply to everybody who's like, yep, I'm following Jesus. But then there's also a spirit of discernment, right? Like there's
mhm,
just listening to the Lord and walking in the Spirit and Him guiding you concerning the various things going on in your life. Um, you want to be careful of not chasing after the likes, chasing after the follows, and I think it's easy to slip into this mindset of, well, because I'm getting a lot of followers, because I'm getting the likes, and I'm gaining a lot of leads or new clients, whatever it is, this is the right thing for me to be doing. But that being said, you may never know how many people you're causing to stumble at the expense of new
mhm,
followers and leads. So, you know, it, uh, it would be much like when I went around that phase where I was really documenting my journey to the stage. Man, I had people reaching out all the time about coaching, diff guys, but who had been, friends with mine for a long time. Like, dude, what are you doing? Can you coach me? Like, you got a program that I can check out, like whatever it is. I'm like, you've known me for like 3 years, man. What happened, right?
yeah,
Now I take my shirt off one time, and you're like, all right. So it obviously, if I, for me to walk around shredded and, you know, um, just to flaunt myself, it would be much easier if I would make a killing, because you just do. People like that. They're
mhm,
looking for that. That's how people. A lot of folks, they walk by sight and not by faith,
mhm,
right? So that's one way that you can, definitely gain. But is that what God wants you to do? Is that how He wants you to go about that? Like, is that actually God first, or are
Mhm.
you serving people? Because you can't serve God and money. You can't serve God and everyone. Like, you gotta choose Him first. And a lot of the times, what He will do is course correct you. If what you're doing is not something that He approves of. Actually,
Mhm.
every time, if you're considering Him in all your ways, He'll direct your path. So
Yep. Would you do bodybuilding again? Would you compete in the show again, or is that kind of was that a one-time thing?
I really had thought about it afterwards, like shortly after. I was like, man, I'm gonna do this again. I did really well. Like, maybe go for my pro card, whatever it is. And the short answer is, I don't think so. Not at this time. Like, I really
Mhm.
don't think so. Only because I know myself, and like I was only doing that because I wanted to challenge myself in order to really just reconnect. When you've been fit for a while, like you can kind of grow out of touch with the struggle that your clients are facing.
Mhm.
So I wanted to feel challenged. I wanted to feel like I sucked at something, if that makes sense. Like I wanted to,
Yep.
I wanted to feel what they were feeling, overwhelmed and, doing stuff that you're not used to. And, for them tracking just basic stuff was maybe harder. For me, like tracking like the sodium and like all the nitpicky stuff was really, you know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I wanted to challenge myself, and I had talked about it, for a while. So I was like, oh, let me see if I can do it. Let me see how well I do. Like I said, did great, but then at the end of it, it was like my relationship with food stunk. If
Mhm.
I talked with another Christian guy who had done a show. I forget where we were, but we were talking about how he was like, if you didn't have an issue with body dysmorphia, and you want it, just go ahead and do a show,
Mhm.
right? Because you go back to eating normal and you gain 10, 15 pounds and you can't see veins in your abs anymore. And you're looking in the mirror like, you're disgusting.
Yeah.
Right? After you just literally nitpicked your body for like
Mhm.
months on end, every little detail and striation. Now you're looking at yourself and you look like a normal human being to everyone else, or still really fit to everyone else, but to you,
Mhm.
you look like a fat slob. So it's like, oh gosh. So no, I probably would. In long answer, I probably wouldn't do it. It's not for everybody. It's
Mhm.
wonderful for some folks, and they've done it gracefully. I'm just not one of those guys.
Yeah, I think it really is. It's so interesting because I still haven't ever gotten like anywhere near that lean. I still got a ways to go that I want to go, and I wouldn't want to get stage lean, but I think it's so interesting that when you could go from being on stage and incredibly shredded, and then put on 10, 15 pounds like you said and still look great. But since you've reached a peak that like hardly anyone ever gets to. And so then when you go down, which is still even incredibly fit to most people, everyone's like, "Wow, you look great." And in your mind you could be like, "No, I don't look good at all." And it's crazy
Oh
because
yeah,
you know what I mean? You could be still visible abs like sub 15, 12,
yeah.
10, 11% body fat, abs still there, and you could really be hard on yourself, and that's so interesting to me. But that leads into another thing I want to talk about as well, because I was just thinking the idea of being very, very lean. Have you ever used fasting in a like a biblical sense? Have you ever incorporated anything like that? And if so, how long and what was that experience like if have you ever done like a long, long fast?
I mean, I've done like in different ways. Like so, like juice fasting. I've
Mhm.
done. I went. I was attempting a week, but I think I lasted like 3 days of no. Actually, I think I lasted 2 days, no food, no water, and then a day where it was just water. And then I was like, I'm gonna die if I don't eat and like take care of myself.
Mhm.
So yes, I've done fasting on different levels, abstaining from food, abstaining from certain things. I don't share this with everybody, but on the first Wednesday of every month, I will do a spiritual fast, and I will not eat food. I might have my mushroom coffee and water, and that's it. Um, So the experience is always wonderful because I just see fasting, I see depriving the body, I see breaking the body down and putting it under subjection as something that makes way for the spirit's voice to be louder, right?
Mhm.
More clear. And God does so much for me. I can get very comfortable in my ways and in my own strength. And I think it's fasting is a really great reminder that you are desperate for the Lord and his grace, and we need him. And it's one way, not just to remind yourself of that, but to communicate that to him, like, Lord, I'm acknowledging that I am desperate for you. I do not have this all figured out. I really need you. There's so much for me to learn and grow and be developed in, and this is one way that I'm showing you that. So I'm a huge advocate of fasting. I've used fasting for fat loss and stuff like that back in the day,
Mhm.
but spiritually, I'm a huge advocate of that, and I think it's kind of I don't want to call it an art or like a lost art, but a lost practice, right?
Mhm.
It's a spiritual discipline that I think a lot of professing believers think is kind of bizarre. If anything, I think I hear more believers talk about fasting for the sake of fat loss than I do for the sake of growing closer to the Lord. So
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's super interesting because I saw on Instagram, I think it was yesterday, former NFL, I think he was a lineman and he was 330 pounds and he's very, very lean now. He lost had to be over 100 pounds, but he talked about how he didn't eat for 40 days. And whether I can confirm or deny it, I can't.
yeah,
But I looked at his profile a little bit, and it looked to me like he's a Christian, and it looked like it came from that lens, like a spiritual kind of depriving your body of food because you need to really enhance, like really grow closer to God through your spiritual
yeah,
experience. And the comments were so overwhelmingly negative,
yeah,
and I think 40 days, obviously that's a lot, but I've even done it for a day or two, and people, it it's a overwhelmingly negative response. It's, "You have to eat. Oh, I can't believe you, like, you're promoting horrible fitness, like, health." People just start lighting you up in the comments, and it's
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's crazy because they don't, 1, they don't try it. 2, they don't consider the faith lens that it comes
yeah,
from.
yeah,
And then 3, people can just be negative on the internet, but it's something that to me is so interesting. It, like you said, it really is kind of a lost practice because people are so comfortable now. We are so comfortable that we can't go more than a day without eating, and then that's like on accident. And people are like, "Oh, I forgot to eat." Like, but to purposely not eat it, I wanna go on a longer fast. I definitely want to see. I really want to push myself in that way, but not from a
yeah,
fat loss. Like the fat loss is cool. It's it's nice, whatever. Like you're definitely gonna lose some weight doing it, but I really do want to lean on the Lord when I do it next time and
yeah,
really get in the Word and
yep.
like just dial in. But
It's
I think
cool, man.
it's such an interesting thing. It really is, But I definitely want to try it. But
Should.
yeah, it's very, very interesting that it's overwhelmingly negative, the response, but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why. I mean, honestly, it blesses my heart, to be able to run a Christian fitness program because those are things that our clients like. We understand. Like they're working with coaches that get fasting. They
mhm,
understand the biblical thing, the things that they're saying that other people are like, "What are you talking about?" The word is like, it's like the little things like that it makes a huge difference in their experience. But like, yeah, we have clients all the time that are like, yeah, we fast with our church, or I'm
mhm,
doing a fast for this. We've recommended fasting, right? If it sounds like
mhm,
they're like dealing with some spiritual warfare, but like even the concept of spiritual warfare is like,
yeah,
what coaching programs are talking about that?
yeah,
Like that's
right,
unheard of. They're like, man, just crack your macros and do these workouts,
yeah, yeah,
so yeah, but it's a part of our lives, man, and we need to embrace it. We really
mhm,
do. But you're right. There's a negative response to it, and I think the way that we combat that is by staying committed, standing firm in our position. Right,
mhm,
the world is waiting for us to crumble
yep,
under their pressure and say, "Ha, see, I told you you weren't as committed," or "Ha, I told you that you're not as serious." But when we hold our position, despite that opposition, and then turn around and display its results graciously, I think it causes some eyes to turn, some ears to perk, and that's opportunity for him to be glorified.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's amazing, and I think I forgot to mention it too. Though when I was fasting, I was doing it for church too. It was every Wednesday, sun up to sundown for Lent, and so that's the one time I did it really, really consistently, and I think that yeah, I just think that it needs to be put. It's a good way to share your faith too. People, are, oh, why are you fasting, or how, like
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Especially people who aren't believers, and if you tell them why, and then you get into it, it's a good way to plant a seed. But as we wrap up today, what would some advice be if you were to give any free advice, free nuggets of information? What would the first thing you say to someone who is a Christian and isn't very big into fitness or nutrition? What would you say to someone starting out?
yeah. I would just remind them that your body belongs to God. Your being belongs to God. As a believer, you've said that it is in you I move and live and breathe and have my being, right? And so just remember that we are triune beings made in the image and likeness of God. And a part of what God has given you is a measure of health that your responsibility is to steward it well, right? Nothing God provides should be treated as insignificant or pointless. Um, we need to steward our bodies well. Not only that, the Bible is very clear that it is in our bodies that the Spirit abides. It is through us that God is moving in the earth, right? We are the hands and feet of Jesus. And so taking good care of yourself, it will glorify God. Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it for the glory of God. And, people will say, you're taking that verse out of context because he was talking about eating unto idols and whatnot. What I will say to that is, there are many idols on the earth right now. They just
Mhm.
aren't in the form of a statue, right? So eating for the sake of comfort, coping with your emotions, being lazy, being a sluggard, right? These things are things that the Bible talks about. So you got to consider, what do I place in front of the Lord when I'm stressed out? What is it that I'm doing that really is taking God's place in my life? Is this God's will for my life? Is this what he intended? So that would be my first thing, is just to ponder that, because once you get to that point where you say, okay, this is God's will, then from there you've given yourself now emotional permission to take your health and fitness seriously, and you can start that
Mhm.
whole journey.
Yep. I think that's phenomenal advice, and again, thank you so much for your time and such great wisdom, great information, and I really hope the listeners apply it, and I appreciate it, man. You're always welcome on the podcast as well, so I appreciate it, brother.
Thank you, brother. This was fun.
Yeah, I agree. God bless you.
God bless you as well, man.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.